and welcome to this session, WISE 2021, on fulfilling the promise of personalised education, where we're going. I'm Dr. Alison Wood. I teach at the University of Cambridge. I'm a fellow at Homerton College, where I run the ambitious programme Homerton Changemakers. And we are in conversation this morning with two stunning founders and CEOs, both pioneering ways to really personalize education in more meaningful and profound ways. Danielle de la Fuente, founder and CEO of Amal Alliance, and Ravi Srinath, founder and CEO of Accelerated Learning. So the question is really, how do we do this? Ravi, it's really great to see you. Welcome indeed. Danielle, welcome indeed. Let's begin with you, Danielle. Tell us about the approach that you and your team are taking to this question of personalized learning.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you for WISE for putting this together. So I think it would make sense to give a little bit of background as to what we do and then bring in forth the approach that we use. So at Amal Alliance, we provide 4 pillars of support for displaced and disenfranchised children, primarily looking at social emotional learning, early childhood development, psychosocial support, and peace education. So really enhancing that holistic development, but also enhancing children's well-being. So in order to do this, well, we need to kind of see what approach are we going to use to personalize learning in this digital world that we're now in. And we have a 4 cornerstone approach. So first, we start by understanding the context to really create customized learning. And what does that mean? You need to understand the context. What is the cultural situation, the nuances? What is there tech available? Is there not tech available? What is the language spoken in the classroom? And all of these different understandings that you can really only gather by really delving deep into the local customs, those different traditions, and then incorporating into the learning. So next we go into identifying relevant skills. So we try to align our social and emotional learning skills predominantly with more universal frameworks. So perhaps like the CASTLE framework that uses self-awareness and self-management and things like this. But also then seeing, well, what are the skills that perhaps are not in this framework that apply to the location that you're working in? So for example, we've introduced creativity in this latest iteration of our work. And that's because right now, I mean, children really need to use their imagination. They need to build those creative skills, especially with all of the anxiety and things happening. And then third, we build teacher capacity. So we're teaching social and emotional skills. And your content, as amazing as it can be, if you're not looking at the teacher's well-being, you're really not going to be delivering quality education, because that will reflect in the learning. So first, understanding, does the teacher understand the different concepts that you're introducing? Are they trained correctly? Do they have the tools and the skills? And then how are they feeling? Because that really will bring life to what's happening in the classroom. And I think it's important to kind of introduce how we're doing this, because so prior to COVID, we were working predominantly in classroom instruction only. And so of course then we had to pivot, and we were working with a lot of displaced and disenfranchised kids that didn't have technology, they didn't have Wi-Fi. So how do you pivot to a digital world if perhaps there's no device or internet? And so we had to get really creative, and we were really fortunate to win the UNHCR COVID-19 challenge and design this education and emergency prototype. And so the way it's delivered is we use podcast instruction as the teacher per se, and I say teacher very loosely. So really anyone can then facilitate a class. You don't need to have a teaching background. And so let's say it's like, oh, hi, today we're talking about empathy, or today we're talking about, whatever the topic of choice is. And then there moves to a digital image. We call them our culturally sensitive non-gendered blobs. So you have this audio component and this very adorable little creature that's going to show the children what they're going to do. But then whoever's facilitating the class now gets them to play. So it's a play and pause situation. So you pause, you play, and then now the children are actually experiencing what we're trying to teach. So it's really play-based learning, it's trauma-informed, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, we use yoga, we use mindfulness, we use dance, art, so children really, really engage with the activities. And lastly, we leverage tech. So the way we leverage tech is we use a learning management system that works offline. So you do need a little bit of Wi-Fi or something to connect and get it onto a tablet or a phone, but then it works offline. So then you start understanding, how is the program working? Is it effective? And you gather that data as soon as there's a hotspot or some Wi-Fi. But you can only really have it available if it is something that's, accessible. There's been many iterations. We now have an offline adaptation that we did with Education Above All to basically turn it into a workbook. So if you really don't have any internet, that's where you're at. And I think I'll stop there.
This sounds an amazing attributes-based methods of learning and teaching, but also really building up well-being and a broader sense of a person that is both culturally and contextually relevant. Tell us a little bit more, Danielle, about what that looks like in practice. How does that actually work?
Yes, and so we were actually really wanted to do an interactive activity, and we were so excited because Lego was going to sponsor us with bricks, and then COVID came to kill the idea, and we were not allowed to bring in bricks. But I think it's actually advantageous because now we're going to have to use our imagination and see and imagine what it's like if you don't have the resources in a classroom. So if we can move to the next slide. We are going to play an activity. We're going to do an activity called the Tower of Success. And there's no wrong way to play this. Well, play or do. And so essentially you have 5 bricks. And each one is a different color. So we have one that's commitment. The other one's motivation, planning, support, and clarity. And you have a goal in mind. So let's take a moment. Everyone visualize a goal, a dream that you have in mind. And now you have to achieve that dream. So how are you going to achieve that dream? If you only have these 5 components, this is your secret sauce. How are you going to prioritize? Does commitment come first, or maybe motivation? So take a moment to think it through. In the ideal classroom, we'd have some Legos and you'd move them around, and now you have your tower. Second best option, we'd have some colors. You you could draw your bricks. But let's just use our imagination and think, how could I achieve my goal if I only had these 5 ingredients? I'll give you guys a moment to think. And we would love to have a brave volunteer share. Fantastic. Would you like to share? How did you prioritize your bricks, your tower of success? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. How are we on time? Do we have time for one more volunteer?
I think we do.
Okay. Anybody else want to be a brave volunteer? Share? No? Okay.
Just before you begin, could you use the microphone, please, for the benefit of those who are joining us online? Thank you.
Hello. Well, for me, also motivation is first, then commitment, like I want to do it. Clarity, once that I know that I want to do it, I need to be like, what is the clear goal? Support, let's see who can support me, who can help me. And now that I have all that, it's planning time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. So, I've done this activity with adults, with children as young as, 4 to some a little bit older to 12, and no tower of success has ever been the same. And I think that's actually one of the most important learnings of it, because then children share and they understand, oh, well, your tower is really great and your tower is really great, and they're all a little bit different. And it doesn't matter what it is or how it's prioritized, as long as you have a clear vision of how you're going to achieve your goals. And they start understanding, okay, well, this is how we move towards making responsible decisions. And this is how we prioritize things. And so these are concepts that are difficult to teach even to some adults. But if you present them in a way that's very easy to understand, it's engaging, it's fun. It's a lot more fun if you have colors or bricks, but it just really kind of ingrains the idea that you're trying to convey. And I do want to mention one thing. So I am not an advocate of replacing classroom instruction with technology, but I do think we can leverage it, especially in these very unprecedented times. So the learning really happens with that magic in the classroom, whether it be the teacher and student relationship or the peer-to-peer relationship. So it really happens in that experience. So it's not so much what you hear, but what you feel. And so in this case, for example, well, you weren't able to touch, you weren't able to feel, so you really had to engage your creativity and your imagination. So imagine classrooms where you can't touch and you can't feel. You have to really augment the content to a way that it's so personalized and so customized that the child is engulfed in what they're learning, really engages, because if not, there's too many other distractions that you're competing with.
It sounds like it really taps into not only those macro cognitive processes, but something very emotional
Yes.
and very meaningful. And then we're in the space of really experiential learning, which matters to people and carries forward. This platform sounds incredible, Danielle.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing, and thank you too for the volunteers who were bold enough to share their towers. Ravi, it's really great to see you, and maybe you could tell us about the work that you're doing. Your approach is a little bit different, and it would be great to hear about what you are doing at Accelerated Learning.
Firstly, for everyone to bear with me to hover over you from the screens and from a distance. But I think the approach might be different. But sorry, one second. I can hear myself speak. Is there any way to? Okay, so if you're still with me,
We are still with you. We can hear you.
I can see myself, I can hear myself, so I'm not sure, like I don't get a lot of feedback here.
Okay.
But Accelerated Learning is an EdTech studio that blends behavioral sciences, evidence-based strategies, and technology to rescue learners and trainers from boring and scary lessons. We not only build our own learning products, we also work closely with various partners to further their learning goals. And these partners could be private companies, it could be schools, it could be government organizations, multilateral programs, and so on. Our skill development programs have impacted thousands of professionals and students in a range of sectors. But the flagship program for us, for Accelerated Learning in the last 5 years, has been what we call our Teach Easy product. It's a personalized teacher development program that's been operational in East Africa and Ethiopia mainly. And we have impacted many thousands of teachers and at least 60,000 learners over the last few years that we've been operational. And it's a program focused entirely on teachers. So teachers are our main target audience. And through teachers, we try to impact the quality of the classroom learning that happens in a very low tech environment. So we use a lot of technology, as we mentioned earlier. So the technology, we also try to hide it away because we operate in mostly low-tech settings, and we want to focus on the output or the outcomes, which are learning outcomes. So our audience comes from a whole range of backgrounds, from various socio-economic backgrounds, tech literacy backgrounds, and tech accessibility backgrounds as well. So we have to make sure that the front end of the product and the service is as easy to use and simple to use as possible. And we try to minimize the technology infrastructure and hide it away, abstract it away in the back end.
Which sounds like
And
a very...
since then,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, since then we've broadened our learning products for a wide range of other audience groups, and now cover employee trainings, and we train researchers and government personnel and many others as well with a very similar framework.
So can I ask you, Ravi, I am all for no to boring and scary lessons. So what do your lessons look like on this epic platform? How come they're no longer boring and scary?
That's a great question. So, I mean, we did a lot of work. We actually did a lot of work at the classroom. So we've observed, I think we would have done maybe 25, 30,000 classroom observations over the last many years to understand how classroom learning happens and what make them first boring and scary. And then next is how to minimize that boring and scary aspect. So classrooms are usually not fun for anyone, at least in our observations, neither for the teacher nor for the student. The focus is mainly on what we like to call the chalk and talk method of education, where the teacher just takes a textbook, copies everything onto the blackboard, and then the students are expected to copy everything back into their notebooks, and then it's all rote memorization and a very boring classroom interaction. So almost no interaction between the teacher and the student, and it's very hierarchy driven, where the teacher is supposed to be the controller or the governor of information, and then it's just one-way flow of content and one-way flow of instructions. So what we instruct our teachers and what Teach Easy does is to reverse the conversation and say, how do we make it easy not only for teachers but also for students, right? So the current model, though, the traditional model does not work for anyone. Teachers get tired by the end of the day. They have to scream for 7 hours back-to-back lessons. They have to repeat everything that they just wrote for 20 minutes on the blackboard back to the students. It's not fun for everyone, for anyone. So we make the teachers use interactive teaching methods. We use proven instruction strategies, like active learning techniques, classroom management techniques, techniques to promote 21st century learning skills, but adapted to the local learning context. So we're not going to say something that worked in Finland or something that works in the US is going to be relevant in a Kenyan context or Ethiopian classroom context. So we've done a lot of work around that as well in trying to figure out how to make them work and help the teachers figure all of this out and help them implement it within the classroom context. And we use a lot of gamification technologies. We also use a concept called skill trees. It's originally originated in, I think, in the world of Warcraft in an actual video game. So we try to apply that concept to motivate our teachers and learners to go for the next goal and the next goal and the next goal in their classroom experience.
So that sounds like a really powerful combination of both intrinsic motivation, that a person is deeply engaged with the idea of the game and the idea of what this knowledge might do, but also extrinsic motivations, that there are structures that are good for the group. This sounds really quite amazing. And I wanted to ask you, Ravi, what does success look like then for you in terms of this platform? Is it numbers of people who start perhaps saying that the classroom is a more joyful place or a more meaningful place? Is it about attainments? How do you understand what a good outcome would be?
So that's a fantastic question, right? So I mean, boring and scary classrooms is something that I think we've all experienced to a certain degree, and I still remember really terrible nightmares from when I was, I don't know, age 5 to age 7 or something, where a family member had to literally drag me to school, kicking and screaming, and I would shout, I don't want to be there, I don't want to do this stuff. So that would be a very immediate indicator if kids are happy to come to school, kids willingly show up to a classroom, and if teachers are very, very encouraged to do a good job in the classroom, I think that would be a very, very immediate, visible indicator. But beyond that, I think there's a lot of other benefits as well. We've tracked and we've had external evaluations by DFID and others as well in a range of indicators on our impact. So things like teacher satisfaction goes up quite a lot, and teacher retention increases quite a lot. The cost for schools is minimized because they don't spend a lot of cycles in hiring and replacing teachers who have left. Student retention increases in the school as well. In private schools, we've seen that. And all of this also is impacted definitely in classroom scores, like test scores and assessment scores. We are still in the works to develop a proper assessment framework. I mean, it's a holy grail for a lot of educators to properly assess higher order thinking skills, especially creativity and critical thinking and analytical skills at a classroom setting across various demographic groups. So we're also part of that conversation, and we're pushing the needle forward on how to develop these learning and testing instruments to better measure our impact.
Yeah, it sounds as though you really are. And I have in mind the transformational competencies that the OECD has really been thinking with as part of their New Learning Compass. And we're all nodding in this room, I'm sure we know it. But it seems to me that those transformational competencies of orchestration and collaboration and that self-awareness that then helps you be better in ambiguity in situations of complexity, they seem vital skills given where we are geopolitically and also in terms of our climate. So what you're doing sounds as though this is profound hope, not only for any individual student, but for the world, frankly.
Thank you. I mean, we are trying, so there's a long way to go, obviously, but we feel we're on the right track.
I think you are. Well, Ravi, I'm just going to ask Danielle now, I think, given that we've had this quite visionary, I think, understanding of what success might look like. Danielle, for the work that you're doing, what does success look like for the Amal Alliance?
So I think that depends on how you define success.
Of
So our Colors of Kindness, our signature program, has proven a 16.5 increase in the well-being of the children. So that in and of itself technically could, fall into very successful and effective programming. But we're trying to increase children's well-being. So to enhance those social and emotional competencies so they can learn how to balance and manage their emotions and effectively express themselves. So how do you define success? Does that mean that perhaps if a child is happier or they have better pro-social behavior or they're eager to collaborate or more understanding? So all of these are different indicators that really fall into how we, I guess, achieve success. One thing that we love to use in our classes is an emotional thermometer. So, every day children check their emotional temperature, and it's very cute. It has emojis. And so, maybe they start off on a neutral day, but as that mood is increasing, that's also an indicator. Are they happier? Are they eager to come to class, as Ravi said? Are they contributing? Perhaps they were very shy and now they're eager to speak up and find agency and purpose. So all of these really fall under success. So I think as we move forward and we think about it, we really need to find these holistic approaches that understand the emotional, the cognitive, all of these different forms of development that really feed off of each other to define moving forward that needle, like where are we going now? But yes.
I'm struck too, thank you. And I'm struck too by the fact that when we're talking about personalized learning, often we talk about that in terms of the process of engagement. And in the last 2 minutes, I'm really curious. So, the big question for 2 minutes from each of you, what potential do you think there is for co creation with students and the communities that they're in and teachers about the very goals of the programs that you're running? So, Ravi, what do you think? You've got a minute. Is there potential for co creation of these big outcomes? We talk about shifting the needle. What if we co create the idea of the needle?
I mean, the answer has to be yes, right? There's no other answer. It's a trick question.
Right.
So,
But how?
absolutely, there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration and co-creation.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
And yeah, definitely. And I mean, we fight with this in many different systems is that the curriculum development is always a lagging function, right? So the world is changing so much faster, but there are certain cycles where the curriculum gets developed by the government departments or the state-run bodies. So it's always trying to catch up with where the world is going, and it's always a reactive process. I think what we need to bring in is a feedback loop that kind of iterates in a much quicker scale, much rapid scale, almost real time, close to real time. And this cannot happen unless students are involved, unless parents are involved, unless other caregivers are involved, or some other third-party providers like ourselves are part of the conversation and try to see some best practices that are happening elsewhere that we can bring into the system as well. So
So a general.
I don't know if it was maybe more than 1 minute, but I'll stop.
No, you're talking about a really general collective view there. Danielle, very,
I'll give
very
you my
briefly,
10-second
give us
view.
the 10-second view.
Huge potential, and it has to move forward. So essentially, children tell you what they need, and we need to listen. And as educators, policymakers, we need to take that from the practice back into the policy, because our systems are outdated, and we need to reimagine how learning takes place. And that'll only happen if we start listening to the needs, the current needs, and the current challenges.
Right, absolutely. And then we can end up with definitely not boring, not scary, far more interactive, far more multimodal and multi-flow, far more non-rote, but also emotionally aware individuals and communities. Thank you both so much for a really informative session. Thank you to all of us here in the room, and onwards with the gentle but wonderful reformation.
Thank you.
Thank you.